It's the real news. I'm Aaron Mate. This is part two of my conversation with John Sipher, national security analyst with the Sipher Brief and a former member of the CIA's clandestine service. In part one, we talked about the recent indictment of the Russian troll farm and the investigation by special counsel Robert Mueller. Here in part two, we talk about comparing that to the U.S. role in interfering with countries around the world. One more thing. Let me play for you a clip of James Woolsey, the former CIA director, speaking recently on Fox News. He was asked if the U.S. interferes in other countries.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably, but it was for the good of the system in order to avoid the communists from taking over. For example, in Europe, in 47, 48, 49, the Greeks and the Italians, we
don't do that now, though? We don't mess around in other people's elections, Jim?
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that? Do a Vine video on a former CIA director.
Only for a very good cause in the interests of democracy.
All right, thanks for being here. It's always great to see you.
That's former CIA Director James Woolsey speaking on Fox News. John, is it fair to say that in the frenzy over this alleged Russian meddling, we may have lost sight of what the U.S. carries out around the world today and over history?
Yeah, I think Mr. Woolsey there handled it a very serious thing in a very sort of flippant way, and I think that's unfortunate. The U.S. involved, you know history like I know history, so clearly the CIA, on behalf of certain presidents, have gotten involved over the years in countries overseas, in elections and things. I don't believe that happens much anymore, but in fact, it happens now more, the U.S. government writ large. You know, we've seen in Gaddafi's Libya, and we've seen in Iraq, and we've seen these kind of efforts overseas. You know, Mr. Putin himself was complaining about Mrs. Clinton in the State Department in 2012 in his election, as opposed to, claiming that was a CIA operation. So you listen, I'm a proud American. I think that the United States has been a force for good in the world. And, my heart doesn't bleed for people like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi and those kind of people who, were dictators and treated their people that way. But I think the United States has learned over the years that some of those early things in the 1950s and others, backfired and didn't work very well. I think you'd be surprised about the debate inside the Intelligence Committee or inside the intelligence agencies when these issues come up. If a president wants to just sort of work around the system to try to use the CIA, to get involved in elections, there would be a lot of pushback, a lot of debate, a lot of explanation about, is that fit with policy? Does it make sense? What's the long-term concern here? So I think, you'll probably find more skeptics inside the intelligence community, as many as you would find outside on these kind of issues.
Let me ask you, this speaks to the consequences of actions like this. When we have these internal deliberations, do we take into account the consequences to the people of these countries who we subvert? So, for example, you mentioned that your heart doesn't bleed for Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi. Sure, but how about for the hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people who've lost their lives as a result of U.S. policies in both these countries?
Yeah, listen, I think the Iraq invasion was a massive strategic blunder that's hurting us today and hurting the people of Iraq. So, yeah, I certainly understand that. And I do think that any kind of serious administration, when they debate these kind of things, absolutely needs to keep those things in mind. So I'm with you on that. These are hard decisions. These are kind of things that you do need to think ahead. And in fact, I wonder if Mr. Putin is thinking ahead. He is antagonizing every Western country for tactical gain. But it's hard for me to see how a country with the economy the size of Portugal, who's making an enemy of all of the developed economies in the world, what's his long-term play here? It's not clear to me.
Well, or the alternative is that is being overblown, and, for example, a Russian troll farm is just being a Russian troll farm.
Right. This is all about this one Russian troll farm, but I'm telling you, it's a much larger thing than this. However, your point's a good one. We're the United States of America. We're the biggest and richest country in the history of the world. This kind of thing should brush off our back. The fact that we're so divided and partisan and let this do this to us is as much to blame on us as it is on them.
All right, we'll leave it there. John Sipher, national security analyst with the Sipher Brief, former member of the CIA's clandestine service. John, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.